The lunch rush at Bellini's had just ended, and the staff moved around the dining room in their familiar dance, clearing tables, refilling water glasses, and resetting places for the dinner crowd that would arrive in a few hours. The restaurant sat on a corner in the old part of town, its brick exterior and green awnings giving it an air of timeless elegance that matched the Italian cuisine they served. Among the waitstaff, one woman moved with particular grace. She wasn't tall or especially striking at first glance, but there was something in the way she carried herself, a kind of quiet dignity that seemed out of place in the bustling restaurant. Her name tag read May, and she had been working at Bellini's for nearly 3 years now. The regulars loved her, not just for her efficiency, but for the genuine warmth in her smile and the way she remembered their preferences without being asked. "Hey, May, can you cover table 12? I've got a party of 8 coming in," called out her coworker from across the room. "No problem," May replied with a nod, tucking a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. She grabbed a pitcher of water and headed to the table by the window, where an older couple had just been seated. The afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, casting golden squares across the polished hardwood floors. As she walked, May's eyes drifted, as they often did, to the corner of the restaurant where a gleaming grand piano stood. It was a beautiful instrument, its ebony surface reflecting the warm lighting of the restaurant. On weekend evenings, local musicians would come to play, filling the space with melodies that complemented the clinking of glasses and murmur of conversation. Something in her face changed when she looked at the piano, a flicker of emotion that came and went so quickly that no one ever noticed. No one but Mr. Rossi, the restaurant owner, who had caught that look more than once. May handed menus to the couple and recited the day's specials with practiced ease. "The chef's making his famous mushroom risotto today, with wild mushrooms that just came in this morning. And the seafood linguine is especially good. The scallops are fresh off the boat." As she spoke, her hands moved with subtle, precise gestures, almost like a conductor marking time. It was another quirk that most people never picked up on. "Thank you, dear," the woman said. "You always make everything sound so tempting." May smiled and promised to return for their orders, then moved to check on her other tables. The afternoon proceeded as usual, a rhythm of orders taken, food delivered, checks processed. The kind of work that kept her body busy while leaving her mind free to wander. By 6 o'clock, the dinner crowd had begun to arrive. Bellini's catered to a mix of customers, young professionals from the nearby office buildings, families celebrating special occasions, and older couples who had been coming to the restaurant for decades. The noise level gradually rose as the tables filled, conversations and laughter blending with the sounds of the kitchen. On this particular evening, there was a reservation for a party of 12 at the long table in the back, some kind of business celebration. Me and 2 other servers were assigned to handle them. "It's the Henderson Group," explained Tomas, the floor manager, during their quick pre-dinner briefing. "They just closed a major deal and Mr. Henderson is bringing clients. They've requested music tonight. Raj will be at the piano from 7 until close." The servers nodded and dispersed to their stations. Me began setting up the large table, carefully placing the heavy silverware and folding cloth napkins into perfect triangles. As she worked, she could hear Raj arrive and greet the staff. He was a music student at the local university who played at Bellini's twice a week, talented, with a repertoire that ranged from classical pieces to jazz standards. "Evening. Everyone," he called out, setting his bag beside the piano bench. He was young, barely 20, with an easy smile and enthusiastic energy. "Any requests for tonight?" The staff called out their favorites as they worked, and Raj laughed, promising to fit them in between the usual dinner selections. He sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench, and began to play, a light, cheerful melody that seemed to brighten the atmosphere even more. May's hands slowed for just a moment as the first notes filled the room. Then she quickly resumed her work, though her movements now seemed to follow the rhythm of the music in a subtle way. The Henderson party arrived at 7:30, filling the back of the restaurant with their voices. Mr. Henderson himself, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit, greeted the staff like old friends, introducing his clients and requesting their best table service. Tomas assured him they would be well taken care of, and nodded to May and the other servers to begin. For the next hour, May was in constant motion, taking drink orders, explaining menu items, bringing appetizers. The Henderson group was celebrating, ordering multiple bottles of wine and the most expensive items on the menu. In the background, Raj played a selection of gentle classical pieces, creating a perfect backdrop for the evening. It was during a brief lull, as the main courses were being prepared, that May passed near the piano on her way to the kitchen. Raj was playing a piece by Debussy, his fingers dancing lightly over the keys. She paused for just a second longer than necessary, watching his hands. "You like this one?" Raj asked, noticing her pause. He was used to people stopping to listen, though most didn't watch his technique with such focus. "It's Clair de Lune," May said quietly. "You're rushing the middle section a little." Raj's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but May had already continued on her way, disappearing through the kitchen doors. When she returned with a tray of salads, he had slowed the tempo slightly, and the piece now flowed with a more dreamlike quality. The evening progressed, the Henderson party growing louder and more celebratory with each course. Mr. Henderson ordered champagne for the table when dessert menus were presented, toasting his clients and his team. "To new partnerships," he announced, raising his glass, "and to tonight's success." It was nearly 10 o'clock when disaster struck. Raj, who had been playing continuously for 3 hours, stood up during a break and stretched his hands. "Just going to grab some water," he told Thomas, heading toward the kitchen. 5 minutes later, he returned looking pale. "I'm so sorry," he said to Thomas in a low voice, "but I've got to leave. My roommate just called. There's been a pipe burst in our apartment and water is everywhere. I need to get home right away." Thomas looked alarmed, but the Henderson party specifically requested music until they leave, and they're showing no signs of wrapping up. He glanced at the boisterous table, where Mr. Henderson was ordering another round of drinks. I know, Raj said miserably, already gathering his things. "I wouldn't leave if it wasn't an emergency. My laptop, all my music scores, everything's in danger of being ruined." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, looking around the restaurant as if a replacement pianist might magically appear. "Go," he sighed. "We'll figure something out." As Raj hurried out, Thomas approached Mr. Rossi, who had come in to check on the evening service. The two men spoke in hushed tones, looking concerned as they glanced toward the Henderson table. May was clearing empty dessert plates when she overheard Mr. Henderson asking about the music. "I was promised piano all evening," he said to Thomas. "My clients are particularly fond of live music, and I mentioned it as a selling point for dinner here." "I understand, sir," Thomas replied smoothly. "We've had a small emergency with our pianist, but we're working to find a solution." Mr. Henderson frowned. "This is disappointing. The evening was going so well." May carried her tray of dishes to the kitchen, but as she pushed through the swinging door, she hesitated. Through the round window in the door, she could see Mr. Rossi looking stressed as he made phone calls, presumably trying to find a last-minute replacement musician. She set down her tray and stood very still for a moment, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. A complex mix of emotions played across her face: hesitation, fear, and something that might have been longing. The kitchen staff moved around her, busy with their tasks, not noticing her internal struggle. Chef Paolo called out orders for the few remaining tables. Pots clanged and dishwashers hummed, but May seemed to hear none of it. After a long moment, she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed back through the door into the dining room. She walked directly to where Mr. Rossi stood near the host station. "Still on his phone, Mr. Rossi," she said quietly, interrupting his call. He looked up, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he recognized her. "Not now, May. I can play," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "The piano. I can play for the rest of the evening." Mr. Rossi's mouth fell open slightly. In 3 years, she had never mentioned being a pianist, though now he understood those lingering glances at the instrument. "You can play?" he repeated, ending his call. "Well enough for—" He gestured toward the Henderson table. May nodded once, her expression suddenly calm, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. "Yes, I can play." Mr. Rossi studied her face for a moment. "All right," he said finally. "Let's find out." Mr. Rossi led May toward the piano, his hand lightly touching her elbow. She could feel the eyes of her co-workers following them, curious expressions on their faces. Thomas raised an eyebrow as they passed, clearly wondering what was happening. "You're sure about this?" Mr. Rossi asked in a low voice. "If you're not comfortable, I can do it," May said more firmly than she felt. Her heart was racing, but her steps remained steady. They reached the piano, its polished surface gleaming under the restaurant lights. For a moment, May just stared at it. How long had it been? 8 years? 9? She'd lost count. "Do you need sheet music?" Mr. Rossi asked, glancing around. "Raj usually brings his own. I'm not sure what we have here." May shook her head. "I'll be fine without it." Mr. Rossi looked uncertain but nodded. "All right, then. I'll let Mr. Henderson know we've arranged for another pianist." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for stepping in. Hey, whatever happens, I appreciate it." As he walked away, May removed her server's apron and folded it neatly, placing it on a nearby chair. She took a deep breath and sat down at the bench, adjusting it slightly. The keys before her seemed both familiar and foreign, like meeting an old friend who had changed over the years. From the corner of her eye, she could see Mr. Rossi speaking to Mr. Henderson, gesturing toward the piano. Mr. Henderson looked skeptical, his gaze traveling to May in her waitress uniform. A few of his guests turned to look as well, mild curiosity on their faces. May closed her eyes for a moment. The restaurant sounds faded, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter from the Henderson table. In her mind, she could hear the music already, waiting to be released. She opened her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major flowed into the room, gentle and hesitant at first, like someone testing the temperature of a pool before diving in. May's fingers remembered the path even after all these years. The muscle memory remained intact, guiding her through the familiar melody. A few heads turned at the opening phrases. Someone at a nearby table paused with a fork halfway to their mouth. By the time she reached the middle section, most conversations had quieted. The piece grew more confident, her hands moving more freely as she settled into the music. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence before scattered applause broke out. May didn't acknowledge it. Without pausing, she moved into another piece, this time Schubert's Impromptu in G-flat major. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. Her face relaxed into an expression that none of her co-workers had ever seen before. At the Henderson table, the clients had stopped talking. Mr. Henderson himself sat back in his chair, his skepticism replaced by surprise. One of the women at his table leaned over to whisper something to him, and he nodded in response, his eyes never leaving the piano. The kitchen staff had begun to peek through the doors, wondering why the restaurant had grown quieter. Chef Paolo stepped out, wiping his hands on a towel, and froze when he saw May at the piano. "Is that—" he began, but Thomas just nodded, his own expression mirroring the chef's amazement. As May continued to play, moving seamlessly from one piece to another, the atmosphere in Bellini's transformed. The waitstaff continued to serve, but they moved more carefully now, trying not to disrupt the music. Customers who had been preparing to leave settled back in their chairs, ordering another drink or dessert just to stay longer. Mr. Rossi stood near the host station, watching with a mixture of relief and astonishment. Whatever he had expected when May offered to play, it certainly wasn't this. The woman at the piano seemed like a different person from the quiet, efficient server he'd known for 3 years. Her whole being appeared transformed by the music. After nearly 40 minutes of continuous playing, May finally paused. She flexed her fingers slightly, looking down at the keys rather than at the room. In the brief silence, someone began to clap, and soon the entire restaurant joined in, a thunderous applause that seemed too big for the intimate space. May looked up, clearly startled by the reaction. A faint blush colored her cheeks as she gave a small nod of acknowledgement. From the Henderson table, Mr. Henderson himself stood up and approached the piano. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice carrying through the now quiet room. "Absolutely extraordinary. Would you play something else for us? Perhaps something a little more celebratory? We're marking a special occasion tonight." May hesitated, then nodded. "Any requests?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Mr. Henderson smiled. "Something joyful. Something that feels like success." May thought for a moment, then her hands returned to the keys. The opening notes of Beethoven's Ode to Joy filled the room, but not in its usual straightforward arrangement. This was a complex variation, building the familiar melody into something richer and more nuanced. It was the kind of interpretation that revealed both technical mastery and emotional depth. Mr. Henderson returned to his table, clearly delighted. His guests were smiling, some tapping their fingers in time with the music. One older gentleman had closed his eyes, a look of pure enjoyment on his face. As May played, memories flooded back. The countless hours of practice in her childhood. The competitions, the scholarships, the moment when everything had changed. She pushed the thoughts away, focusing only on the present moment, on the feel of the keys beneath her fingers and the sound filling the space around her. When she finished the Beethoven piece, she moved directly into something lighter, a jazz standard that Raj often played during dinner service. She gave it her own classical twist, drawing appreciative smiles from the staff who recognized the tune. Time seemed to lose meaning as she continued to play. Her initial nervousness had disappeared, replaced by a kind of peaceful concentration. This was where she belonged, where she had always belonged, though she had convinced herself otherwise for so long. It was nearly midnight when the Henderson party finally prepared to leave. Mr. Henderson approached the piano again, this time with his entire group. "My dear," he said to May, "you have made our celebration truly special. May I ask where you usually perform? My wife and I would love to hear you play again." May's hand stilled on the keys. "I don't perform," she said quietly. "Not anymore. I just work here." The surprise on their faces was almost comical. "You're a waitress?" one of the women asked, unable to hide her disbelief. "Yes," May replied simply. "But you play like you should be on stage at Carnegie Hall," another guest said, shaking his head. Mr. Henderson studied her face for a moment. "Well, whatever your story is, you have an extraordinary gift. Thank you for sharing it with us tonight." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the piano. "If you ever change your mind about performing, please call me. I'm on the board of the Symphony Association, and we're always looking for talent." May didn't touch the card, but she nodded politely. "Thank you for listening," she said. As the Henderson party gathered their things and made their way out, other customers began to leave as well. Many stopped by the piano to express their appreciation, some asking the same questions about where she performed or studied. May answered politely but briefly, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Mr. Rossi approached after the last customer had gone. The restaurant was empty now except for the staff, who were busy with closing duties but kept glancing over at May. "That was unexpected," Mr. Rossi said, leaning against the piano. "In 3 years you never mentioned you could play like that." May shrugged slightly. "You never asked." Her fingers trailed lightly over the keys, not pressing down enough to make a sound. "Where did you learn?" "You must have studied somewhere remarkable." A shadow passed over May's face. "It was a long time ago." Mr. Rossi sensed her reluctance and changed direction. "Well, you saved us tonight." Mr. Henderson was thrilled. He left an enormous tip for the whole staff. He paused. "Would you consider playing again? Not regularly like Raj, but perhaps when he can't make it. We would pay you, of course, the same rate we pay him." May stood up from the bench, smoothing her uniform. "I should help with closing," she said, avoiding the question. "May," Mr. Rossi said gently, "what I heard tonight wasn't just good playing. It was something special, something rare." She picked up her apron from the chair where she'd left it. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But right now I need to finish my shift." Mr. Rossi nodded, knowing better than to push. "Of course." As May walked back to her section to clear the remaining tables, her co-workers approached one by one, expressing their amazement and asking questions. She answered minimally, deflecting their curiosity with practiced ease. But inside, something had shifted. A door she had firmly closed years ago had been cracked open, and she wasn't sure if she could close it again or if she even wanted to. The morning after her unexpected performance, May woke to the sound of rain against her apartment window. She lay still for a moment, listening to the gentle patter, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling inside her. Her fingers tingled with a familiar ache. Muscles long unused had been awakened. She flexed them above her, studying the slender digits as if they belonged to someone else. Playing last night had felt like stepping into her old skin, one she'd shed years ago. The sensation was both comforting and terrifying. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Thomas from the restaurant. "May, have you seen it?" he asked the moment she answered. "Seen what?" She sat up, pushing her hair from her face. "The video. Someone from the Henderson party posted a clip of you playing last night. It's everywhere. Mr. Rossi says the phone's been ringing nonstop with people asking if you'll be playing again tonight." May's stomach tightened. "What? No, I haven't seen anything." "Who posted it?" "I don't know, but it's got thousands of views already. People are calling you the waitress virtuoso. You've got to come in early today. Mr. Rossi wants to talk to you." After hanging up, May sat frozen on the edge of her bed. This was exactly what she'd been avoiding for years. Attention, questions, expectations. With shaking hands, she opened her laptop and searched for the video. It didn't take long to find. Someone had filmed her playing the Beethoven piece, capturing both her intense focus and the spellbound faces of the customers. The comments beneath the video ranged from amazement to speculation about her background. Who is she? Why is someone who plays like this waiting tables? Conservatory trained for sure, look at her technique. That's Bellini's restaurant, I'm going there tonight. May closed the laptop, her breathing shallow. Part of her wanted to call Mr. Rossi and quit, to pack her things and disappear before anyone could ask the question she'd been running from. But another part, a part she thought had died long ago, felt a flicker of something like hope. She dressed carefully, as if putting on armor, and headed to Bellini's 3 hours before her shift was scheduled to begin. The restaurant was quieter in the daytime, sunlight streaming through the windows and catching dust motes in golden beams. A few staff members were setting up for lunch service. They looked up when she entered, their expressions a mix of awe and curiosity. "May," called out Wu, one of the busboys. "You're famous." She gave a tight smile and headed directly to Mr. Rossi's small office at the back. The door was open and she could see him on the phone, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. When he spotted her, he quickly wrapped up the call. "May, come in," he said, rising to greet her. "Quite a morning we're having." She took the chair across from his desk, sitting on the edge as if prepared to flee. "Thomas mentioned a video," she said quietly. Yes, it's been quite something. We're fully booked for dinner tonight, and most people called asking specifically if you would be playing." Mr. Rossi leaned forward, excitement clear on his face. "This is an incredible opportunity for the restaurant and for you." May looked down at her hands. "I'm not sure I want to play again." Mr. Rossi's expression shifted to confusion. "But why? You're brilliant. Everyone who's seen the video says so." "I have my reasons," she said simply. He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "All right, I won't push. But I should tell you, Mr. Henderson called this morning. He wasn't just making polite conversation last night about being on the symphony board. He's serious about wanting to speak with you professionally." May's head snapped up. "You didn't give him my information, did you?" "Of course not. But he's coming in for lunch today specifically to talk to you." Mr. Rossi hesitated. "May, whatever your reasons for hiding your talent, maybe it's time to reconsider. Opportunities like this don't come along every day." She stood up abruptly. "I need to get ready for my shift." "May," Mr. Rossi called as she reached the door. "Just talk to him. That's all I'm asking." The lunch service was busier than usual, with several tables occupied by people who mentioned seeing the video. They watched May as she worked, some taking photos discreetly on their phones. She kept her head down, focusing on her tasks with mechanical precision. Mr. Henderson arrived at noon with an older gentleman. They were seated in May's section, not by coincidence, she was sure. She approached their table with professional detachment. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Can I get you started with some drinks?" Mr. Henderson beamed at her. Our pianist. I was hoping to see you today." He gestured to his companion. "This is Professor Chen from the conservatory. He saw your video this morning and was quite impressed." Professor Chen, a dignified man with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes, studied May with interest. "Your technique is remarkable," he said, "particularly in someone who hasn't been performing regularly." "Where did you study?" May's grip tightened on her notepad. "I'd be happy to tell you about our specials today," she said, ignoring the question. "The chef has prepared a lovely seafood risotto, and the soup is a Tuscan bean with fresh herbs." Mr. Henderson looked taken aback, but Professor Chen merely smiled, as if her evasion confirmed something for him. "The risotto sounds excellent," he said, "and perhaps a glass of the house white." They ordered quickly, and May escaped to the kitchen, feeling their eyes on her back. When she returned with their drinks, Professor Chen spoke again. "You remind me of a student I had once," he said casually. "Extraordinary talent, similar style to yours. She disappeared from the music world quite suddenly. Very sad." May's hand trembled slightly as she set down his wine glass. "Will there be anything else for now?" "Yes," said Mr. Henderson, his tone more serious. "An explanation, perhaps? I don't mean to pry, but it's not every day one finds world-class talent serving pasta. People are curious." "I'm just doing my job, sir," May replied. "If you'll excuse me, I have other tables." Throughout their meal, she could feel them watching her, conferring in low voices. When she brought their check, Professor Chen placed a business card on her tray. "If you ever want to talk about music," he said gently, "my door is always open. No pressure, no expectations." May slipped the card into her pocket without looking at it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and questions she deflected. By evening, the restaurant was packed. Raj had arrived for his regular piano gig, but the disappointment on some customers' faces when they realized May wouldn't be playing was obvious. During her break, she slipped outside to the small alley behind the restaurant. The night air was cool against her flushed face. She leaned against the brick wall, closing her eyes and trying to center herself. The metal door creaked open and Raj stepped out, lighting a cigarette. "Oh, sorry," he said when he spotted her. "Didn't know anyone was out here." May shook her head. "It's fine." He took a drag, watching her curiously. "So you're the one everyone's talking about." "I saw the video." She didn't respond. "You're really good," he continued. "Like scary good. Makes me wonder why I even bother." "You play beautifully," May said automatically. Raj laughed. "Thanks, but we both know that's not true. I play well enough for background music at a nice restaurant. You play like..." He gestured vaguely with his cigarette. "Like you've got something inside that needs to get out." The description hit uncomfortably close to home. May wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild evening. "Can I ask you something?" Raj said after a moment. "Why hide it? A gift like that?" May looked up at the narrow strip of sky visible between the buildings. A few stars peeked through the city's light pollution. "Sometimes gifts become burdens," she said softly. "Sometimes they cost too much." Raj considered this, then nodded slowly. "I get that. More than you might think." He dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his heel. "For what it's worth, I think you should play tonight. Those people in there, they felt something when they heard you. Something real. That's rare." Before she could respond, he slipped back inside, leaving her alone with her thoughts. When her break ended, May returned to find Mr. Rossi waiting for her. "There you are," he said with relief. "Listen, Raj has offered to take a break at 8 o'clock. He thinks, and I agree, that you should play a short set, just 3 or 4 pieces. The customers are asking for it, May." She started to shake her head, but Mr. Rossi held up his hand. "Before you refuse, know that I'm not asking as your boss. This isn't about the restaurant anymore. This is about you. Whatever you're running from, and I can see that you are, maybe it's time to stop." His words hung in the air between them. May felt a familiar panic rising in her chest, but also something else. A tiny voice that whispered, "Maybe he's right." "I need to think," she said finally. Mr. Rossi nodded. 8 o'clock. "If you decide not to play, I'll understand." The next 2 hours crawled by. May moved through her tasks mechanically, her mind elsewhere. At 7:55, Raj announced he was taking a short break. The expectant hush that fell over the restaurant was palpable. All eyes turned to May. She stood frozen by the kitchen door, a tray of empty glasses in her hands. The weight of expectation felt suffocating. But beneath that was something else. A hunger she'd been denying for years. Her fingers itched to touch the keys again, to release the music that had been locked away for so long. With trembling hands, she set down the tray and walked toward the piano. As May approached the piano, the restaurant fell completely silent. Even the kitchen staff paused their work, peering through the service windows. She could feel everyone watching, their curiosity, their expectations. Her legs felt like they might give way beneath her. The bench seemed both welcoming and threatening as she sat down. She adjusted it slightly, a stall tactic while she gathered her courage. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling visibly. For a terrible moment, she thought she might not be able to play at all. The pressure of the audience, the weight of her own past, it all pressed down on her, threatening to crush her resolve. She closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. And then, without conscious decision, her fingers found the keys. The piece that emerged wasn't the classical masterwork the audience might have expected. Instead, it was something gentler, a folk melody her grandmother had taught her when she was just 5 years old, before formal training and competitions had entered her life. Simple, pure, filled with childhood memories of sunlight through kitchen windows and the smell of jasmine tea. As the sweet, uncomplicated notes filled the room, something inside May began to loosen. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing deepened. The music carried her away from the restaurant, away from the watching eyes, back to a time when playing had been nothing but joy. When the folk song ended, she opened her eyes to find the restaurant still hushed, as if no one wanted to break the spell. She moved without pause into another piece, this time Debussy's Reverie, its dreamy quality perfectly capturing her current state of mind. The music flowed from her fingers like water, natural and effortless. She had forgotten this feeling, or perhaps she had forced herself to forget. The way the world narrowed to just her and the piano, the way each note resonated not just in the air but inside her very bones, the way time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. For the next 20 minutes, May played without stopping, moving from piece to piece as her heart dictated. Some were technically challenging works that showcased her virtuosity. Others were simpler compositions that spoke directly to the soul. Together they formed a kind of musical autobiography, pieces that had shaped her, defined her, saved her throughout her life. When she finally stopped, the silence held for a heartbeat before the applause erupted, thunderous, immediate, filled with genuine appreciation. People stood from their tables, some wiping tears from their eyes. Mr. Rossi beamed from his position by the door. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to join the ovation. May rose from the bench, giving a small, awkward bow. The applause continued as she made her way back to the kitchen, her face flushed with emotion. Thomas intercepted her, handing her a glass of water. "That was incredible," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "Absolutely incredible." She sipped the water gratefully, noticing her hands were still shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the rush of feelings coursing through her. "There's someone here to see you," Thomas added, gesturing toward the office. "Mr. Rossi asked me to bring you back there when you finished playing." May frowned. "Who is it?" She wouldn't give her name. "Just said you'd want to talk to her." Curiosity overtook her exhaustion. May made her way to the office, still hearing the excited chatter from the dining room behind her. She knocked lightly on the partially open door. "Come in," called a woman's voice, one that sent a jolt of recognition through May's entire body. She pushed the door open slowly, almost afraid of what she would find. Sitting in Mr. Rossi's chair was an elegant older woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Despite being in her 70s, her posture was perfect, her gaze sharp and assessing. She wore a simple black dress with a single strand of pearls, a uniform of sorts that May remembered all too well. "Professor Lin," May whispered. The woman inclined her head slightly. "It's been a long time, Liu Mei. Almost 9 years, I believe." May remained frozen in the doorway, unable to step further into the room. "How did you find me?" "Professor Chen called me the moment he saw your video. He recognized your technique immediately, as did I when I watched it. My teaching is evident in every movement of your hands." There was a hint of pride beneath the stern exterior. No one else plays Chopin's E-flat nocturne with that particular emphasis on the middle section. "I've always said so." May's mind raced. Professor Lin had been her teacher from age 7 until everything fell apart. The most demanding, exacting instructor at the conservatory, the woman who had shaped her into a prodigy, and who had been devastated by her disappearance from the music world. "Why are you here?" May asked, finally stepping into the office and closing the door behind her. Professor Lin studied her former student carefully. "I could ask you the same question. Why is the most promising pianist I ever taught serving pasta in an Italian restaurant?" The blunt question hit May like a physical blow. "You know why," she said quietly. "I know what happened. I don't know why you disappeared completely. Why you threw away everything." Professor Lin's voice remained level, but May could hear the old hurt beneath it. "Do you have any idea what it did to those of us who believed in you? Who invested years in your talent?" "I couldn't," May began, then stopped, struggling to find the words. "After the accident, after the surgeries, when the doctor said I might never play at the same level again, I couldn't face it. The pity, the whispers, the struggle to reclaim something that had once been so natural. So you ran away, changed your name, became someone else entirely. May looked down at her hands, the hands that had just played so beautifully after years of silence. Yes, Professor Lin sighed, some of her sternness melting away. And yet here you are playing again. I watched you tonight, from the back of the restaurant. Your technique has suffered, certainly. Your runs in the Chopin were sloppy. Your pedaling in the Bach was excessive. May almost smiled. Some things never changed. But, Professor Lin continued, there was something else there too. Something I don't think I ever heard when you were my student. A depth, a humanity. The older woman leaned forward slightly. You're playing from your soul now, not just your hands. The unexpected compliment brought tears to May's eyes. From Professor Lin, it was higher praise than any technical perfection could ever be. What happens now? May asked, suddenly feeling like that 7-year-old girl at her first lesson again, looking to her teacher for guidance. That depends on you, Professor Lin replied. But I think you already know you can't go back to pretending this isn't who you are. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the desk between them. The Zimmerman competition is accepting applications. It's for pianists who left their careers and are returning to music. No age limits, no restrictions about previous accomplishments. May stared at the folder but didn't touch it. I'm not ready for a competition. Perhaps not. But you need a goal. Structure. Purpose. Professor Lin's expression softened further, showing a rare glimpse of the deep affection she had always had for her most gifted pupil. And you need to stop punishing yourself for what happened. I'm not. Yes, you are. The accident wasn't your fault, May. And your recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The doctor said you might never play again, yet here you are moving an entire restaurant to tears. She gestured toward the door, where the sounds of the still buzzing dining room filtered through. You've been given a second chance. Don't waste it serving pasta. May sank into the chair across from her former teacher, suddenly overwhelmed. I don't know if I can do it. Go back to that world. You don't have to decide everything tonight, but you do need to decide one thing. Professor Lin fixed her with that penetrating gaze that had intimidated generations of students. Are you going to continue hiding from your gift? Or are you ready to embrace it again, on your own terms this time? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, the restaurant continued its evening service. May could hear Raj back at the piano playing a jazzy rendition of a popular song. Life was moving forward as it always did. I've missed it, May admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Playing, music, all of it. I've tried so hard not to, but I have. Professor Lin nodded as if she had known this all along. Music isn't something you choose, May. It chooses you. It always has. Before May could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mr. Rossi poked his head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman out here insisting on speaking with May. Says he's from the symphony. Should I tell him to come back another time? May looked at Professor Lin, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. Taking a deep breath, May made her decision. No, she said, straightening her shoulders. I'll speak with him. 6 months had passed since the night May first played the piano at Bellini's. Spring had given way to summer, and now the leaves were beginning to turn golden as autumn crept into the city. So much had changed in that short time. Yet some mornings May still woke up wondering if it had all been a dream. Today was one of those mornings. She stood at her apartment window, coffee in hand, watching the early sunlight paint the buildings across the street. On her kitchen table lay a stack of newspapers and magazines with her face on them. The Waitress Virtuoso returns to the stage, read one headline. Liu Mei, from server to symphony, declared another. The buzzer rang, startling her from her thoughts. She pressed the intercom. Hello. Car's here, came the crisp voice of her new manager, Vivian. Coming down, May replied, gathering her things. She took one last look around her apartment, the same modest place she'd lived in for years, though now a sleek upright piano occupied what had once been her dining area. Professor Lin had insisted she needed a proper instrument for daily practice. The old upright had been delivered the week after their reunion at Bellini's, a gift from the professor that May had initially tried to refuse. Don't be stubborn, Professor Lin had said in her no-nonsense way. You can pay me back with a lifetime of beautiful music. May smiled at the memory as she locked her apartment door and headed downstairs. Vivian waited by a black town car, tapping something into her phone. She looked up as May approached. "Ready for the final rehearsal?" she asked, opening the car door. "As ready as I'll ever be," May replied, sliding into the back seat. As the car navigated the morning traffic, May closed her eyes, mentally reviewing the program for tomorrow night's performance. It would be her first major concert since returning to music, a special event with the symphony featuring comeback artists who had left the classical music world and found their way back. When Mr. Henderson had first proposed the idea to her that night at Bellini's, it had seemed impossible. Now it was hours away from becoming reality. The car pulled up in front of the concert hall, its grand facade still impressive to May despite the many times she'd entered it over the past months. Vivian led the way through the stage door, nodding to security guards who now recognized them both. Inside, the vast space was alive with activity, stagehands adjusting lights, sound technicians running final checks, musicians warming up in corners and hallways. The familiar controlled chaos of a venue preparing for a major performance. "There she is," called a friendly voice. Raj jogged over, grinning broadly. He had traded his usual jeans and t-shirt for dress pants and a button-down shirt, his new uniform as a music student at the conservatory, where Professor Lin had helped him gain admission after recognizing his potential. "Nervous?" he asked, falling into step beside May. She gave him a small smile. "Terrified. You'll be amazing," he assured her. "Everyone who heard you at Bellini's knows it." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "By the way, the whole restaurant staff is coming tomorrow night. Mr. Rossi bought tickets for everyone, even the dishwashers." The thought of her former co-workers in the audience brought warmth to May's chest. They had been so supportive throughout this whirlwind journey, celebrating each small victory with her. Mr. Rossi had been especially understanding, keeping her job open during the first uncertain months while insisting she take all the time she needed to explore this second chance. "Places. Everyone," called the stage manager, clapping her hands for attention. "Final full rehearsal starting in 5 minutes." Mee made her way to the green room to prepare. As she sat before the mirror, she studied her reflection. She looked different now, still herself but somehow more alive, more present. The shadows that had lurked behind her eyes for so many years had begun to fade. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Professor Lin entered, elegant as always in her practical concert black. She surveyed May with a critical eye. "Your hair needs tidying," she said by way of greeting, moving behind May to adjust a few loose strands. Their eyes met in the mirror. "What if I can't do this?" May whispered, finally voicing the fear that had been her constant companion. "What if I get out there and freeze? Or what if I play but it's not good enough? What if—" "Enough," Professor Lin said firmly, resting her hands on May's shoulders. "We've been through this. You've practiced until your fingers could play these pieces in your sleep. Your technique has returned. Different, perhaps, but in many ways more nuanced than before. You are ready." May took a deep breath, drawing strength from her teacher's confidence. "I still don't understand why you never gave up on me, even after I disappeared for all those years." Professor Lin's expression softened slightly. "Because talent like yours doesn't come along in a teacher's lifetime very often. And because—" she hesitated, uncharacteristically emotional. "Because I knew the accident broke more than just your hand. It broke your heart. Some injuries take longer to heal than others." Before May could respond, the stage manager's voice came over the intercom. "Ms. Liu to the stage, please. We're ready for your rehearsal." Professor Lin straightened, her moment of vulnerability passing. "Remember what we discussed? Technical perfection is not the goal here. Connect with the music. Connect with your audience. Tell your story through the notes." May nodded and rose from her seat. As she walked toward the stage, she passed a wall of photographs showing famous musicians who had performed in this hall over the decades. Among them was a small, newer photo, the viral image of her at Bellini's piano, head bowed in concentration, still wearing her waitress uniform. The contrast between that moment and now struck her forcefully. She had been so afraid then, afraid of returning to music, afraid of failing, afraid of facing her past. Some of that fear remained, but it was now accompanied by something stronger: determination. The stage lights were blinding as she stepped out. The auditorium stretched before her, empty today but tomorrow to be filled with nearly 2,000 people. At center stage stood the magnificent grand piano, lid raised, waiting for her. As she settled on the bench, adjusting it to her height, the conductor smiled encouragingly. "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Liu." May placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool, smooth surface beneath her fingertips. She had chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 for her comeback performance, a piece about overcoming, about returning from darkness, about finding one's voice again. The composer had written it after recovering from a deep depression that had silenced his creativity for years. It seemed fitting. The orchestra began the dark, pulsing opening chords. May closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. When the moment came for the piano to enter, her hands moved with certainty and passion. The notes poured forth, filling the vast space, telling her story without words, the joy of her early talent, the devastating accident that had crushed both bones and dreams, the years of hiding, and finally, the return to herself. As the movement built to its powerful conclusion, May felt tears on her cheeks but kept playing, pouring everything into the music. When the final chord faded, there was a moment of perfect silence before enthusiastic applause broke out from the small group of people scattered throughout the auditorium. Other musicians, technical staff, administrators who had paused their work to listen. The conductor wiped his own eyes. "I think we're ready for tomorrow," he said simply. Later, as May walked back to the green room, her phone buzzed with a text from Tomas. "Restaurant packed tonight. Everyone talking about your concert tomorrow. So proud of you. Chef says he's naming a dish after you, thinking pasta alla virtuosa." May smiled, tucking the phone away. She found Professor Lin waiting for her, a rare smile softening her usually stern features. "Well?" he asked. "There's still work to do," Professor Lin replied predictably. "Your arpeggios in the third movement need attention, and there were moments when you rushed the tempo." She paused, then added quietly, "But you played from your heart. That cannot be taught." Coming from Professor Lin, it was the highest praise imaginable. As they gathered their belongings to leave, Vivian appeared with a small bouquet of flowers. "These just arrived for you," she said, handing them to May. The card read simply, "From your family at Bellini's. The piano misses you, but we're so happy the world gets to hear you play again." May held the flowers close as they left the concert hall. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the city in golden light. People rushed by, lost in their own lives, unaware of the journey that had brought her to this moment. Tomorrow she would share that journey with them through her music. As the car pulled away from the curb, May caught sight of a poster for tomorrow's concert hanging on the side of the building. Her face looked back at her, not the frightened waitress from the viral video, but a confident artist ready to reclaim her place in the world. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Vivian asked from the front seat. May looked out at the city passing by, the same street she had walked as a waitress now seen through new eyes. "Yes," she said, and for the first time in years she truly meant it. "I'm ready,"